Happy New Year and welcome back to Locked On Red Sox podcast. I hope everybody had an amazing Christmas weekend, stayed safe, stayed away from COVID with all the outbreaks going on right now, and had a very fun and safe New Year's Eve and New Year's Day as well. Hopefully, you weren't too sick in the morning after a fun New Year's Eve. But I am Jake Ignazuski. You can also call me Iggy for short. And I'm here with my co-host, Lauren Campbell, who is a NESN writer. And today we're going to sort of reflect on 2021 as a whole for the Red Sox, as well as give our New Year's resolutions for 2022. And we got a lot of great interactions from you guys through Twitter. So we're going to talk about that next.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Red Sox and for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen every single day. So I want to start off sort of asking you, Lauren, how was your Christmas weekend?
It was great. It was low key. Got a lot of family time with my family and my fiance's family, which we don't get to do much throughout the year. So it was very, very nice. How was yours? What did you do?
It was good. Mainly just hung out with family, watched some football. It's kind of weird having football on Christmas. I don't know
I
about
know.
you, but I got some good Red Sox stuff. I got a nice beer koozie. And funny
Nice.
enough, it actually has Fenway Park on it. I said to my mom, I'm like, now I can look at Heaven 2.0 whenever I want.
Exactly. I got a sweet pair of Red Sox, so like Converse sneakers. So I
Oh, there you
cannot
go.
wait to be wearing those at Fenway in the spring, the summer, and heading into the fall in 2022.
I love it. I love it. So I want to first start off. I didn't let you know that I was going to do this, but I wanted to first start off and thank everybody so much for a great 2021 for supporting the podcast. I joined the podcast around at the start of December, and it's really been amazing. All the support, not only the podcast has received, but myself has received for being the new co-host, and I really appreciate you, Lauren, and the Locked On Network for bringing me on and really helping this be a great part of the end of my 2021.
Yeah, I'm so happy you're here. Like, thank you for jumping on with ease and becoming my new co-host. And I just feel like it's been a very positive thing since you've come on. I took over in July, and I was very nervous because I've never hosted a podcast before. And it's been so much fun. It's been fun getting to the listeners, and I'm so excited for 2022 with you and to see what this podcast can bring, because you're already crushing the Twitter game. So I can't wait to see what we can do in a full year.
100%, me as well. Something that actually I remember mentioning to you, Lauren, is one of our goals throughout the 2022 season is we want to be the most fan engaged Red Sox podcast that there is out there. That's one of the biggest reasons why I don't know if you guys notice on Twitter, and if you haven't already followed us on Twitter, go over and follow us. It's LO_Red Sox. But every single episode we put out sort of what we're going to kind of talk about, and we give you guys the opportunity to get involved. We want the fans to get involved so we can not only bring up more subjects that you guys want to hear about, but we want to engage with the fans that are so passionate about this team. And even with all the interviews that we do, we got some really exciting interviews, not only this next week but also throughout this month before the season. We're trying to spice up the lockout a little bit, but we want to get you guys involved as well, and get some of your questions that you guys would want to ask these people. And so I want to first start off by reflecting on 2021. And I don't know about you, Lauren, but I definitely did not expect this Red Sox team to be as successful as it was throughout 2021.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I certainly did not think they were going to be as bad as a lot of analysts and experts out there were predicting at the beginning of the season. But I don't think you can really be upset with a 92-70 record when this team
Right.
was projected to finish fourth in the AL and was slated to essentially miss the entire postseason. And they almost went all the way. So I think that when you look back on the 2021 season, you look at the roster, you look at the injuries, the COVID issues. I think Red Sox fans should be happy about it, but also should be hungry for the World Series for 2022.
1000%. And I found it very interesting, seeing how fans really reacted to the team, going into the All-Star break, first in the AL East with the best record in the AL. And like you mentioned, their expectations were to be a fourth best team in the AL or in the AL East, excuse me, and to, be a lower tier type of team. But something that I thought about, reflecting on this 2021 season is I don't want fans to think that just because the team over exceeded expectations that they did going into 2021, that they're going to do the same thing in 2022, and that just because they came 2 games away from the World Series, that now they're ultimately going to win the World Series. Nobody expected this team, especially going into the playoffs, to do what they did against the not only the Yankees, the Rays, the Astros. But obviously, there's so much more things that Chaim Bloom in the front office can do during this lockout. But I would just hate for fans to have this expectation. Yeah, they won 92 games. Now they're probably going to exceed expectations even more. Maybe we could win 100.
That'd be nice. I'd love a 100 win season, especially there's still, I mean, there was a lot of questions going into last season, and I think there's even more going into this season for a number of reasons. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I was more optimistic going into last season. Maybe that's because there's just so much unknown right now with the lockout, not really knowing when spring training will start. I mean, pitchers and catchers are supposed to report in like 40 days or 47 days or there's something like that. So
That's crazy.
I mean, it's going to be, regardless of when the season starts, it's going to be fun because the team still has good players. They have players they had last year still on the
100%.
roster. There's the farm system. There's a lot to look forward to. So I'm super excited, and I'm excited to see what Chaim Bloom has up his sleeve for when this lockout ends.
Yeah, 1000%. It was interesting really thinking back on 2021, and not only the people who came up big, like Nathan Valdi as well as Schwarber did when he came over, but I found myself thinking about August. Remember how awful August and September
Oh
were for
yeah.
the Red Sox? I mean, just talking about how the record was. I mean, they had a 12-16 record in August, and I believe that that's the worst that they've ever had in that month, and it was pretty scary, especially going into the end of that season. Getting down to the last week or so, even when they were playing the Nationals, I remember just almost biting my nails off, so nervous that they could possibly not even make the playoffs.
Yeah, August was a completely different Red Sox team, I feel like, than from the first half of the season. I remember going into the All-Star break super happy, super pumped for this team. And then watching Matt Barnes in the All-Star game, I was like, oh, it's okay. Like, it's the All-Star game, doesn't really mean anything. Just it's okay if he looks bad there because he's not going to do this in the second half of the season. And I was very wrong. I was very, very wrong about that. But August was a very painful month for the Red Sox, and it reminded me of, the 2011 collapse. It's just all of a sudden they were just a bad team, and there was no real reason. Like there was no like you couldn't figure it out. You knew there were issues within the team, the bullpen. Then the offense went silent when the pitching was good, and then the offense was really good, and the pitching couldn't hold it together. It just seemed like they could not get on the same page in August. And thankfully, it didn't cost them too much because they did get into the postseason. But August was, if we could erase 1 month from the Red Sox season in 2021, it would most certainly be August.
Oh, 1000%. And then especially when you double down on the COVID outbreak that
Oh, yeah.
happened when, half of the team was AAA players. I mean, when you look at it, I read an article from, I think it was September 17th, and it said from August 27th, 12 Red Sox players had gone on. And, I think ultimately there was like 14 to 16 players as well as staff that had COVID. And I was thinking in my mind, like, is this just going to extend, this awful stress that they're having? But I remember, especially when they were playing the Rays, I was just super nervous that, they were just going to sweep us clean. I'm pretty sure that the Sox won 2 games out of 3 games of that series.
And there's never a good time to get a COVID outbreak by any means, but when it happened to the Red Sox, it could not have come at a worse time. That team was struggling so bad. They could not get anything together, it seemed like. And then COVID just ran through their clubhouse, and it was bound to happen. I mean, it was happening through other teams, and This was still when they weren't mandating the vaccine, and they weren't, I mean, no league is mandated the vaccine, but there wasn't a whole lot of knowledge on the vaccine like we have now. So, and we knew that the Red Sox were one of the least vaccinated teams. So at some point it was bound to happen, whether the team was vaccinated or not. It just could not have happened at the most possible worst time. And there's no way to test out of protocols at that time. You just had to kind of go with it. And you were like, well, we're going to be without Chris Sale. We're going to be without Nick Pivetta, Xander Bogaerts. We're going to be without essentially the starting nine and just try our best. But then you had Jonathan Aruz come up big. You had other AAA players come up really big. And unfortunately, some of them got COVID too. But nevertheless, they persisted.
Yeah, 100%. And it was really interesting. We put out a tweet, I believe it was on New Year's Eve, asking fans what their favorite moments from the regular season in 2021 were. I didn't want to make it too broad of all of 2021 because I knew that there was going to be tons of replies of Kike's walk-off home run against the Rays in the ALDS, or Christian Vasquez's home run in the ALDS, and or Xander Bogaerts' home run in the wild card game. But it was really interesting, looking back at what some of the fans' favorite moments were. One that you brought up came from the COVID outbreak was Jack Lopez making his MLB debut. Jeff Wax, one of our Twitter followers, brought that up. And it was pretty incredible to see a guy who spent 883 minor league games in the minors since 2012 have the opportunity to show what he's got, especially at Fenway.
Yeah, I mean, you think back too, you think of how many games really 883 is. So you think of a regular MLB regular season, 162 games. So give or take, that's almost 8 full minor league seasons that you're playing in those games. And it gets to a point where you think like, oh, am I ever going to get into the big leagues? Am I ever going to have my shot? And Jack Lopez did. I mean, he's got, what's he been in the minor league since 2012, 2011? And it was really great to see what he could do during a time when the Red Sox really couldn't do anything about their situation. So I like that one. That's my man Jeff there. Good fan favorite moment from the regular season. Probably an underrated one too.
1000%. When he said it, I sort of laughed a little bit. It also made me, nobody brought this up, but it made me think of the Cutter Crawford start. I remember out of nowhere, we found out that Nick Pivetta wasn't going to be starting for the Red Sox, and Cutter Crawford had to come up. I remember I'm like, who the hell is Cutter Crawford? And finding out that a AA player is supposed to come. I wish I looked this up before we started recording, but I forget exactly who he pitched against. But I remember it was during that COVID outbreak. I'm like, could things get any more worse?
Yeah, I was kind of the same thing when I got the notification. I was like, I've heard the name, but it's really all I could tell you about him. I couldn't really tell you much about Crawford. And especially when Nick Pivetta, he was a very pleasant surprise this season for the Red Sox. And again, during that outbreak where you're just like, what could possibly go wrong? What more could go wrong? Who the hell is Cutter Crawford? And now he's gotten some recognition, and I think he's gotten some eyes on him. So it's always good for those minor league players, whether it's someone like Jack Lopez or somebody like Cutter Crawford, to kind of get that recognition, even if it's in kind of a sour light because of COVID just ravaging the clubhouse.
Right, exactly. And Adam Olson brought up Renfroe throwing out Wendell for the final out. That was during what most people would call the Renfroe game, when he hit the 2-run home run against the Rays. And the Sox ultimately ended up winning 2-1, and Hunter Renfroe was pretty much the only reason why they did.
Yeah, and it's always fun when it's against someone's former team. So that was a bit like a sweeter moment in that game as well. But Hunter Renfroe had a lot of good moments for the Red Sox this season, especially in the outfield. He had such a cannon of an arm, or has such a cannon of an arm, and he showed that off, especially in that game, and came up huge, making that final out there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know if you remember that he said that a few of his friends that were on the Rays sent him white flag emoji through text, which I find is hysterical. But then also Roberto G said when Schwarber bowed after making a routine play at first base, which kind of it completely left my mind. I completely forgot about that memory, and it's so funny thinking about a guy Schwarber who just learned first base this past season, just making a play that every everyday first basemen make, and then he has to give his tip to the cap to the crowd.
Yeah, that was really a good moment for Schwarber because he definitely bought into the fact that, he probably heard and probably saw some things that people were like, why is he playing first base? He was traded for when he was injured. We know what happened to Christian Arroyo when he tried to play first base. We don't
Right.
want this happening again. So just to see that, a guy who's known for anything but his infield defense was able to kind of play into that and have his own fun with it and be like, yeah, I did it. I made a routine play. Go me.
Exactly. And then lastly, the last fan favorite moment of the regular season was Michael Quiggs, and I thought his comment was pretty funny. Every time Frenchie Cordero got sent down to Worcester, and I
Poor
would actually
Frenchie.
say I would say he can go in the same boat as like Rusney Castillo, not to the same effect, because Rusney is the king of Pawtucket Red Sox baseball. But every single time Franchi went down to Worcester, he just turned himself into an all-star player. And then it seemed like anytime he would come up to Boston, all that improvement he sort of forgot and just fell flat on his face.
Yeah, Franchi, I feel bad for the guy because it's not his fault that he gets up and down and all this, but it's always funny to me to see that someone can have so much success in the minor leagues and for whatever reason, whether it's just they need more reps in AAA or AA, wherever it may be, for whatever reason, it just cannot translate to the big leagues. And I know there's a lot of differences between AAA and MLB and everything like that, but it's mind-boggling to watch him just obliterate the ball in AAA, and then he comes up to MLB, and he just can't seem to find contact for if his life depended on it.
Right.
It's I mean, it is what it is with Franchi. I think that people especially Red Sox fans, they know with Rusney Castillo that sometimes doesn't always work out, but especially with Castillo and that contract, he didn't really have any say. Like he was just tied to AAA, unfortunately. But
Right.
poor Franchi, I feel bad for the guy, but I understand why that was Michael's favorite moment of 2021.
Well, the thing that I want to say as well with French is it made it worse for him, especially in Red Sox fans' mind, when it's you and Josh Winkowski, the only two people who are announced when Andrew Benintendi is traded. In Red Sox fans' minds, those are the only two people that they got, but they forget about the three players to be named who have now obviously been named. And most of those guys are like 18, 19 years old. So we're not going to know how the trade works out for another 4 to 5 years. But Franchi Cordero is just so tied to that trade that I remember seeing throughout the season. People are like comparing him and Andrew Benintendi's stats, and they're like, well, this trade did work out. And I'm over here thinking, like, what about the four other guys? Josh Winkowski's a guy who didn't even crack the top 30 in the Red Sox prospect list, and now he's top 20, top 15.
Yeah, it's funny when big trades happen, and I understand like Red Sox fans and their knee-jerk reactions, but it's so funny to me, like you said, when they sit there and they compare like Franchi's numbers to Benintendi's numbers, or people constantly compare Verdugo's numbers to Betts's numbers. And I'm like, I understand that that's like the centerpiece of that trade, and if they had comparable numbers, if they were the same kind of player, it would have been a one-for-one trade. There wouldn't be
Right.
all these other prospects and other players involved. And at some point, we'll find out who won the trade. You're not going to find out who won the trade after a few games, after half a season, after a full season, especially when there's players to be named later, especially when there's prospects involved. We could look back on this 3 or 4 years from now and be like, wow, the Red Sox definitely won that trade. It's
Right.
still a long time from now, but who knows? We still could win. The Red Sox certainly still could win that Benintendi trade.
Yeah, 1000%. It'll be really interested to see how it all turns out. But I really appreciate everybody who did, reply to that tweet and give us their favorite moments in the regular season from 2021. But in next segment, we're going to be going over our 2022 New Year's resolutions. But first, Lauren wanted to talk to you about Built Bar.
I do. I love Built Bar. You probably all know me by now that I absolutely love Built Bar. And now that it's the new year, it means New Year's resolutions. And if yours is about getting fit or maybe even eating healthier, make sure you include a Built Bar in your plan. It's the protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar and maybe even a little bit better than a candy bar. And you want to eat healthy, but it does get boring. I completely understand. Chicken and rice can get so boring after 3 or 4 days. By like week
Yeah.
3, you're probably like, this isn't worth it. Where's the chocolate? But here's the thing with Built Bars. They are covered in 100% real chocolate, so they are the perfect thing to keep you on track for those New Year's resolutions. And most of them, they contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. So, like I said, they're healthy, they taste great. There's nothing better than a Built Bar, especially to kick off the new year. And we have an offer for you. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order. That's LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
Well, I wanted to thank everybody so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen every single day. Lauren and I are so excited to continue, not only giving you news throughout the Red Sox season, but also, trying to make this lockout a little bit more exciting. So we sort of wanted to start off this new year talking about our 2022 New Year's resolutions. Now we know New Year's resolutions usually have, the stigma around them that they don't fully work out or people don't fully stick to them. But hopefully the Red Sox will stick to these. I wanted to start off with something that is on everybody's mind, and I'm really hoping Chaim Bloom is listening to this and that he actually makes this a priority before the season starts. But Rafael Devers needs to be signed to an extension ASAP.
Yeah, I wonder too if there's obviously now with the lockout, can't do anything, but if there is something there where they want to try to maybe rework Xander Bogaerts' contract, if they don't know, or if they want to know maybe where Devers kind of fits into this lineup going forward. Do they want to commit to him at third base? Do they want to commit to him as the DH going forward? And then again, it becomes, where does Xander Bogaerts go? Are you going to put him at second? Are you going to put him at third? So I wonder if there's kind of talks there to try to rework Xander's contract before they get to Devers. But regardless, I do think an extension is coming for Devers soon. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened in season or maybe like near the trade deadline or the All-Star break. But I also wouldn't be surprised if it came once this lockout ended. But I do think it is a priority there. I think that they like what they have in his production. It's just a matter of he needs to be better on defense because he looks like a liability at times this year.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's not something where the only reason I put the ASAP at the end of it was because I am just so nervous that his value is going to keep rising and rising, and that the Red Sox are ultimately going to have to spend more money than they would have had to if they signed him at the start of this offseason. And, when you look at what he did last season, I mean, he's only 25 years old with an average of 279, 38 home runs, 113 RBIs. And when you also look at it as well, across of all of the 2021 Red Sox, he led them in RBIs, home runs, and runs scored. And so a 25-year-old out of all the, all-stars that are on this team is leading the team in all these different offensive categories. It's pretty incredible.
It is. And you look at the market, you see what some other shortstops had gotten, and you wonder, once Carlos Correa signs, once this lockout is over, if that will impact the way Xander Bogaerts goes into potentially opting out, going into a free agency and kind of trying to maybe negotiate with the Red Sox. I think Devers, his value will only continue to skyrocket, especially if he continues to produce the offense he has. I think that he's certainly shown his reliability at the plate. And he did have a few issues last season, but he did attribute that to some injuries where he'd make contact with the ball and everything would just hurt. And he'd end up, and if he made contact, it didn't hurt. If he swung, he ended up getting hurt, which probably explained all the hell hacks he would take throughout the season. But I think at the end of the day, if they want Devers to stay around in a Red Sox uniform, they need to get him signed sooner rather than later, because like you said, his value will go up, and it makes you wonder if the Red Sox would want to spend what he's worth if they don't sign him before he skyrockets.
Yeah, he would really put every single might of his strength into all those swings, and then it would just, like you said, it hurt his wrist at the end of the day. Yeah. But I agree with exactly with what you're saying with Xander Bogaerts. I think he gave the Red Sox the hometown discount that they were hoping for during his last extension. And this is going to be his last opportunity, honestly, in his career, where he's going to be able to cash in on a big contract. And I think it's going to be really interesting how the Red Sox really go about this situation. Obviously, he's already mentioned that he's probably going to opt out at the end of this next season. And so it does beg into question, what are the Red Sox going to do Xander Bogaerts, and how does that tie into Rafael Devers? We both know how good of friends Rafi and Bogey are, and we both know that those guys are essentially the cornerstones of this franchise right now. And so it should be a number one priority at the end of this lockout to try and resolve those situations as quickly as possible. So not only the franchise is good in the future, but so fans don't have to have a heart attack that both of these cornerstones could be leaving in the next 2 to 3 years. Like essentially what happened with when Mookie Betts left a few years ago. But looking at one of the, in my opinion, the Achilles heel of this 2021 Red Sox team was their bullpen. And in my opinion, I think one of the New Year's resolutions is that they need to add more reliable pieces, not only to the bullpen, but they need to find who is their closer in 2022.
Yeah, I think that as much as Matt Barnes showed great potential in the first half of the season, I think that he showed he can't keep that up. And whether that was mental, whether it was physical, hopefully they figure that out in spring training, or even if they're kind of working on things now, because he would try to work on his mechanics and nothing seemed to be working. So I don't know if Alex Cora wants to go into the 2022 season relying on Matt Barnes. There's plenty of options out there. It's just a matter of, are they going to go with internal options like a Garrett Whitlock? Are they going to look outside of the Red Sox farm system here and go get a setup man or go get relievers? They need to 100%. I mean, no offense to Ryan Brazier, but he's just not the answer to be a setup man. And as much as the bullpen held it together at times last year, they need reliability and they need stability, because that's what's going to get you into the postseason. That's what's going to win you games. And if you're leaving your closer, your all-star closer, off of postseason rosters and only adding him because of injuries, that is a problem.
1000%. And going into the playoffs, I think we all had the same mindset going into it, that this is not a World Series bullpen. Like it's just not. It's not reliable enough. And like you mentioned, Barnes also, a lot of people forget, he signed a 2-year extension. 2-year, $12 million extension in the middle of the season. Granted, yes, it was right before he became an all-star closer. And it's something where when you look at really what happened with him at the end of last season, he had a 6.48 ERA over 22 games. But it's really interesting when you look at the workload that the Red Sox put on Matt Barnes at the start of the season. I actually didn't realize this. He appeared in 38 games before the All-Star break, which is pretty staggering, especially for a closer. And something that Red Sox pitching coach Dave Bush mentioned is that he feels like that the workload was one of the biggest reasons why Barnes fell off and had so many issues to be able to get guys out in the later half of the season. So I most likely see him as a setup man, but I completely agree. They need to figure out the closer situation. There's plenty of options, guys like Ian Kennedy, as well as potentially even Joe Kelly, Archie Bradley. It'll be interesting to see if they go more towards the trade market or if they try to go for the free agency market.
Yeah, and going back to the workload, I think we've seen that so many times, especially we saw it in the COVID season, we saw it in 2019, that just the relievers just were overworked. And you can't overwork your relievers so far or so early in the season, because when you get further in, they're going to be fatigued, they're going to be tired. We saw it with Okajima years ago that he couldn't get it together anymore because he was so overworked. So that's where the reliability and that stability comes in. And it was great watching Matt Barnes just dominate and be almost unhittable for the first half of the season, but it obviously caught up to him. So sure, if he could be, I don't know if they could like platoon their closers, that would be a hell of a thing to do. But, you mentioned Joe Kelly, the familiarity there would be good. There's Micah Givens. I like him. Ian Kennedy, like you said. So there's plenty of options out there for relievers and to kind of bolster this bullpen. I'm very, very intrigued by this because I have no idea which way Chaim Bloom is going to go.
I completely agree. There's another subject that I was really excited to talk to you about was something that one of our Twitter followers and good friend of the show, Sean Palmer, mentioned. Is he said, I need them to find a way to keep Tristan Casas, Bobby Dalbec, and Kyle Schwarber. And I found this very interesting. And something that I think that the Red Sox are going to try and do throughout the season. You brought up Devers is he's very iffy on defense. He improved a little bit last year at third base, but I just don't see him at third base in the future for the Red Sox. I think it'd be interesting to see how Dalbec works out at third base a little bit. Just give him some time over there. He did come up as a first baseman and third baseman coming through the farm system, and he did play a little bit of third base last season. I believe it was during when all the COVID stuff was going on. But I think it would be really interesting to see him over there. And if you don't see Bobby Dalbec over there, I don't really see the Sox going like a whole Blake Swihart sort of approach of putting him in the outfield. And I think when Tristan Casas comes up, I think it's going to be really difficult to keep Bobby Dalbec on this roster.
Yeah, and especially if Bobby Dalbec is going to continue to play the way he was last year. I felt like when the Red Sox traded for Kyle Schwarber, kind of lit a fire under Dalbec, and he started playing a hell of a lot better and really kind of came into the player that many fans expected him to be. So Cassius coming up is going to be very interesting because you just, like you said, it's going to be hard to keep Dalbec on this roster. It's going to be even harder to find room for everyone if everyone's playing well. Obviously, Kyle Schwarber still is a free agent, but from everything I've read, it sounds like the Red Sox are still the favorites to sign him once the lockout is over. I mean, right now you look at the roster, it's like, oh yeah, they definitely could get all these guys. They could keep them. But once they're all in Red Sox uniforms on that bench, is it going to be like Alex Cora going in and it's like, oh, I have to sit Dalbec tonight to play Schwarber, or I have to play Tristan Casas instead of Schwarber? It's like, how do you ride the hot bat? Do you give the kid a chance? There's going to be a lot of, especially if they bring Schwarber back, I think there's going to be a ton of eyes on this team, more so than the last few years.
So something that Red Sox athletic writer Jen McCaffrey said that I think is really interesting. I think this is the way that we could keep all three of these players. Trade JD Martinez. If you trade JD Martinez, you sign Kyle Schwarber back. Schwarber can play. He can play the outfield. He can also be the team's DH. And if you think about it, when Schwarber's in the outfield or when he's not playing, Bobby Dalbec goes at DH. And Jen also predicted that Casas could be up by June. I also found it very interesting. She said I think he's going to come up by June. It's 16 home runs.
Right before the trade deadline.
Exactly. But I think that's the way that you do it, especially with JD Martinez costing the Red Sox right now. I think it's $19.25 million. And he's in the last year of his contract. Yes, you are missing a major piece in your lineup, but this could be a way that the Red Sox could not only potentially bolster their starting rotation, potentially get some bullpen guys, potentially get a closer, and free up not only this money part of it, but free up the part in the lineup as well as the position for Kyle Schwarber to slot right in there.
Yeah, it's honestly something I didn't even consider. It's not something that crossed my mind. And I still think JD Martinez has a very tradable contract. It's team friendly. Yes, he would be a rental, but maybe you can be like, hey, sign here. If you trade him to a contender, you don't trade him to some like terrible, no good team. I don't think he'd want to do that. Not that, once you get traded, you get traded. But I don't hate the idea of it. He's been very good for the Red Sox, but I understand he's also he's had his struggles as well. But if it's going to get you your pitching depth, if it's going to get you some money in there to free up, because he's got a friendly contract, I don't think they need to try to retain salary or do anything like that. But I don't know. Maybe I could be talked into that. Like I said, it was not something that crossed my mind, and now it's kind of like got me like the wheels turning a little. Where I'm like, oh, I mean that certainly is one way to keep Casas, Dalbec, and Schwarber.
And Jen mentioned something that I think it would just open the floodgates not only for potential suitors for JD but also for Schwarber. If the universal DH does come into intact,
Right.
That opens up the teams. Opens up 15 more teams. But the last thing that I just wanted to mention that one of our Twitter followers said, Bo Sox Breakdown, he said, have faith in Chaim Bloom. Until things backfire, you can't bash the guy. Looking at what Chaim did, not only with this team over 2 seasons, 116 wins, 106 losses. He also improved the farm system. It was the most improved farm system in 2021, going from 24th in 2020 to 12th in 2021. And I'm just going to make it short and sweet, as I've always said. # and Chaim we trust.
And the thing is, too, Chaim Bloom was brought in to rebuild this farm system, and that's what he's doing. Just like Dave Dombrowski was brought in to absolutely destroy this farm system, and that's exactly what he did. And he did it, I would do all the trades 10 times over that Dave Dombrowski did. And you have to look back on the pieces that he traded away, the pieces that are no longer with the farm system, and how long that takes to rebuild and to kind of get that farm system where it should be. There's a lot of solid players and players to be excited about. And you need to have patience with that. I'm not a patient person, and I have to just sit here and hope Chaim Bloom's smarter than me. So I have trust in him, and he says all the right things, and right now he's for the most part doing all the right things. And until the Red Sox just have a terrible, no good season, if they have like a 2020 COVID season, then I'm going to start questioning stuff that he does. But right now, I'm going to stay put, and I'm going to stay content and not have any sort of freak out because it's only been 2 seasons. I mean, you got to let the guy work.
Exactly. And one thing that my good friend at work, Noah Martell, always says, shout out to you, Noah, is, I just can't wait 2 to 3 years. And I said to him, like, well, would you rather have them be good for 2 to 3 years and then stink for 5 years after? Or would you rather have them be mediocre for the first 2 to 3 years and then win for 10 years in a row? That's what I'm trying to build.
Right.
But those are our 2022 New Year's resolutions. And I just wanted to end this podcast on a positive note. If you're going into 2022 with all these resolutions, with all these goals, take some time to look at 2021. Be proud of yourself of how far you come. Be proud of everything that you accomplished. Be proud of everything that you did. Don't compare yourself to other people, and give yourself that pat on the back that you need. But I really appreciate everybody tuning in to our first episode of 2022 and for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen every single day. And now make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms. Also, make sure you follow Locked On Red Sox on Twitter, LO_Red Sox. Also, myself on Twitter at Jake Iggy. And I want to give a little shout out to Paul in Lisburn. I'm going to do my best for you, Paul, to get Lauren's Twitter handle correctly. Really appreciate you for not only listening to the podcast, but for listening to the podcast as long as you do, to be able to hear me screw up Lauren's Twitter handle throughout my time on this podcast. But make sure to follow Lauren on Twitter. It's 3 Laws, Lauren with 4 R's. I think I got that right? Hey,
yeah,
let's
2022
go.
is going to be a great year.
Hey, let's go. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And make sure to not only follow, but subscribe on whatever audio platform you're listening to, or if you're watching on YouTube, because we have some very exciting interviews this next week. The next episode that you're going to see posted, we're having 2004 Red Sox champion Bronson Arroyo. So definitely check that out. Thank you so much for all tuning in and for all the support. And we will see you guys next time. Peace.